Hi everybody, and today I'll be explaining about the investigations pertaining to the gunshot suicides, the standard operating procedures, what we call that means how should be the investigator approach in a case of suicide due to gunshots. As we all know that gun crimes are not unusual, and suicide due to gunshots are also not unusual. And many cases where the suicides involving the gunshot is always looked under suspicion. And this suspicion leads to a lot of imaginations, and there will be many stories being created, and ultimately the whole death will become a mystery. And this is something none of the investigators want, nor the state wants this sort of mysteries. And all these mysteries are as a result of incompetency or total lack of experience either by the investigating officer or failure to follow the standard protocol. Hence, I am going to discuss about the standard procedures in the investigations of death, suicide due to gunshot. The first and the foremost thing is, whenever there is a suicide with a gunshot has been reported, investigation should follow in the 4 basic steps. First is the crime scene examination. Second is studying or understanding the circumstances. Understanding the circumstances surrounding the individual and the death, which also involve a psychological autopsies. And the third is the post-mortem examination. And the fourth and the most important thing is the lab investigations. So all this thing together, which always important to put all this thing together and then come into a conclusion. So first let me discuss about the crime scene examination. Whenever a death is reported with these cases of suspected suicide, when the information reaches the police or the investigating officer, they are the first responders to the crime. They immediately arrive at the scene of crime, and the first and the foremost duty is to secure the block, secure the crime scene, identifying the entry and the exit points, and more importantly, render all the assistance required for an emergency in case if the individual is not dead. If he is dead, then confirm the death and then analyze whatever the different specialities required for the examination of the crime scene apart from the crime scene officers. Then inform accordingly. And the next step is the preliminary assessment and the evaluation of the crime scene. So the duty of the crime scene officers is first to assess the crime scene, secure the borders again, identify the borders, identify all the investigative materials. In this case, the ammunitions, the gun, the place of residence, the technical evidences involving the CCTV, the mobile phone or the laptop or his personal belongings or any fingerprints, and then label it, identify by giving the number cards, followed by the processing of the crime scene. In the processing of the crime scene, you need to retrieve all those evidence materials, before which you will take all the sketches, the photographs, measurements, and then put all the evidence material according to their numbers into the evidence bags and pack and seal. And you make an inventory of that. Thereafter, after processing of the crime scene, again you make the documentation and recording of the crime scene, for which you also have a liberty to reassess the crime scene. See, these are all the important steps to be followed in any crime scene of examination, and in this particular thing related to the gunshots. The more importantly in this particular case, the guns, the body, the spent shells, and any splinters or any bullets available, the unfired cartridges if any. So the fingerprints. So these are all the very important evidence materials which need to be looked for. So this is the first step which we have finished. Going to the second step, the understanding the circumstances and the psychological autopsy we call. For this we need to interview some of the family members, the friends or the colleagues at his workplace, which we can extract a lot of information. The information should be pertaining to the deceased financial matters, deceased psychiatric conditions or the psychological part of the deceased, deceased relationship with his family members, relationship with his colleagues, deceased career related issues, property related issues. So all these things should be carefully, or more importantly, deceased medical history if he is suffering from any diseases or in medical condition, or any history of drug abuse, substance abuse. So all these things are carefully analyzed and studied in these circumstances related to the death of this suicide. Thereafter, the body will be shifted from the crime scene to the morgue in a body bag, and this crime scene, once the body has been shifted into the morgue, the most important thing is the hand should be bagged by a paper bags, and this to be shifted to the morgue. And once it is shifted, before the actual dissection takes place, the more important thing is you need to subject the body for the radiological examination to identify the splinters or the bullet inside the body. Once the radiological examination is complete, the next step is, before you declothe the body, is take all the gunshot residues both on the clothings as well as from the fingers, especially from the if it's a right-handed person, the right hand, the index and the thumb, the angle are in the clefts. So these are the areas where you usually look for the gunshot residues. So after taking the gunshot residues and taking those evidences and bagging it up in the evidence bags, then you need to declothe one by one, and before that take the gunshot residues from the clothing material also, and each cloth should be packed and sealed into a separate body bag, separate evidence bags. Thereafter you should start with the dissection, and if the gunshot wound or the suicide is prefer the head, so you should always make a bloodless field to the head, so that the first step is to take out all the organs from the thorax, that is en masse removal is always advisable. And thereafter last is to open the skull and look for the internal damage. So, and track of the bullet, the direction, the angulation and the internal structure damage, the bullet, where it has been lodged, and the modification in the bullet structure should be analyzed, and the bullet should be marked, and that should be taken in the evidence bag. So this will be the completion of the autopsy. And the next thing is the lab results. The lab, it's the most important. Of course, the autopsy, we do send the body fluids apart from the clothing and the gunshot residues. We also look for the blood and the urine, or even the bile, for any intoxicant. So that is very important material to need to preserve. And more importantly, histological examinations of all the organ systems is very vital to understand the medical conditions of the deceased. So that completes the complete autopsy examination. And the last part, the laboratory examinations. In the laboratory examinations, after analyzing all the ingestion of any substance abuse, it is very vital to understand the ballistic examinations in this particular case. The ballistic examination involves the examination of the gun. So what in the gun? More importantly, the identity of the gun. So the markings present on the barrel, the markings present on the trigger, or on the butt, on the base of the stock, or maybe sometimes on the chamber. So it depends on the make of the gun. So this thing to be dismantled and look for the identification number, so that to define the exact identity of the weapon used. Thereafter, the ammunitions. The ammunitions, how much ammunitions cartridges were present, how much were used, how much were unused, how many shells recovered, and the bullet recovered from the body. This thing all to be compared. And then the gun recovered from the crime scene. And this gun will be used to test fire a bullet in the laboratory. Now, the gun which has been recovered will also be looked for any fingerprints on it. And the test fire bullet and the crime bullet Both are compared with each other in a comparison microscope. And then the confirmation that for this particular gun was used in the crime or not will be concluded. So this is how we come into a conclusion that the same gun was used or not. Yes, now we have come into a conclusion that after following all those 4 steps considered to be a standard operating procedure in concluding the suicide, that indeed if he had killed himself. This is a very important procedure which need to be adopted. More importantly, the circumstances and the psychological autopsy, what we mentioned in the step 2 of the investigations, that is very essential in all cases of suicide, because that clearly establishes the motive, and that motive will help us to understand if there is existence of any abettor or there is an abatement for this particular suicide. So it's very important that in all cases of suicide, the investigating officer need to follow all this standard operating procedure to arrive into the conclusion of a case of suicide. So it is always essential that to rule out any abatement in a case of suicide. And if there is any failure in this following of the protocols, the real justifications cannot be done for a case of suicide, or else the death becomes a mystery, or else an innocent person may be penalized. Hence, it is essential for us to adopt standard operating procedures as described. Thank you.